right, thank you. I'd like to call to order the regular governing board meeting of the Jefferson Elementary School District, October 14th, 2020 at exactly 7:00 p.m. And may we get a, excuse me, members present.
Yes, Mr. Koo.
Here.
Mrs. Brizuela is not present. Mabel Manio.
Here.
Ms. Manufa Lienga Anoa'i.
Present.
Mr. Shakil Ali.
Here. And I would like, excuse me, Mr. Valenti to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Can I get screen sharing, please?
Let's see.
Sorry. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
At this time, the governance team will review the guidelines, and as agreed upon, we will get everyone's agreement to follow all the guidelines instead of just focusing on one. So if we're all in agreement with that, we can okay, move on. Thank you. So 7:05. All right, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve the meeting agenda.
Second.
All right, that was seconded by Mr. Koo. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Unanimously approved.
Mr. Ali, if we want to go to the next section first, and then we'll come back to the public hearing, just so it's after 7:05.
All right. Let's see. Excuse me. We will go ahead and start off with board member acknowledgements, item number 7, and we'll start with Ms. Manio.
Hi, good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all. I am now joining you after being on medical leave for quite some time, but happy to be here and good to see you. I just actually jumped off the high school open house, I guess, and I just wanted to commend some of our middle school counselors that were spearheading that and giving us information on how to enroll and transition out of our district. As you know, I have an 8th grader here, so it was important for me to be on that Zoom meeting and very informative. So thank you to our middle school counselors that were giving us the information for that. And I just hope that everyone is doing well and staying safe and still keeping socially distant through these times and are doing okay with our students virtually and on Zoom. I know it's tough, but we are, you know, we're making it through. So good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Koo?
For me, I actually was also just watching the 8th grade orientation for high school at first, right before this as well too. Also, just want to wish everybody a happy October. I know it's been a long year already. And lastly, PSA plug again, the last day register to vote is next Monday, October 19th. You can do it online at registertovote.ca.gov, and it takes literally just minutes. So just want to remind everybody to register to vote for the November elections.
All right. Ms. Liana Anoa'i?
Good evening, everyone. And I'm going to say talofa because it's happy belated Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm glad that we got to celebrate that this week. I loved seeing how many were able to celebrate virtually and share a lot of their culture and their heritage, being from Indigenous backgrounds, and also celebrating, Indigenous Peoples Day in different ways. And the reason why I'm excited to share that is because I know that together we've been pushing ethnic studies curriculum. And so I just feel that all of that is aligned with the movement that we've been promoting. And then I'm glad that Trustee Koo had mentioned that October 19th is the last day. I would like to also add to that is that we want to make sure, with unfortunately all the voter fraud that is really rampant right now, that we make sure that we get our ballots to an official voting center, an official voting drop-off site. I also wanted to share, and I was excited to hear, we were initially extended to the 31st of October for census. Unfortunately, that has been pulled back just by 2 weeks, and we are now extended to only October 15th, which we know is tomorrow. So if no one hasn't done it yet, if we are aware that folks still have delayed on doing that, we still want to continue to encourage people to complete their census, because as we know, that impacts our funding as a school district. But I, like Trustee Manyo, want to wish everyone well. Continue to hang in there. You are super appreciated. These are very challenging times. And all we can do is, I think of it every day, and I can hear President Ali saying that all we can do is our best, and that truly is all we can do during these times. And I just want to say that it's wonderful to see you back, Trustee Manyo. I'm so glad that you're doing better, and it's great to see you on the Zoom tonight. But glad to be here, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening. And I too would like to welcome Trustee Manyo back. It's great to see you. And just want to encourage everyone and just reiterate what I said at the last meeting, which is that this is a marathon and we're doing well. We still have a long way to go. And, we all need to encourage each other and stay positive as best as we can, and not internalize any of these issues that are out of our control. Excuse me. So it's 7:08, so we can go back to item number 6, which is public hearing. Item 6A, public hearing to review and approve a resolution on the district's sufficiency of pupils' textbooks. The governing board of the Jefferson Elementary School District will hear public comments on the resolution stating sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials at every school for the 2020 to 21 school year is consistent with their alignment to state content standards and most recent adoption cycles. And we will start the hearing at 7:09.
We have no speaker cards for this item.
All right. So since there are no speaker cards, we will end the hearing at 7:10.
Mr. Ali, just before we move on, could you notice if we are being live streamed now from your other monitor?
Yeah, so I actually was looking at it and I didn't see.
Okay, are we there now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, you can proceed.
All right, so it is still 7:09. So we'll give it a few seconds. All right, it's now 7:10, and we will move on to item 6B. Public hearing on a proposed adoption of an increase in school facility fees. The governing board of the Jefferson Elementary School District will consider input from the public on the proposed adoption of an increase in the statutory school facilities fee established by the district against residential construction and reconstruction at $4.08 per square foot and against new commercial or industrial construction at 66 cents per square foot as approved by the State Allocation Board on January 22nd, 2020. The adoption of the increase of the Level 1 fee is necessary to fund the construction of needed school facilities to accommodate growth due to development. And we will start the hearing at 7:11. And do we have any speaker cards?
We do not have speakers on this item.
Comments? Okay. No speakers. We will end the hearing at 7:12. And as we wait for 7:12 to come, we'll pick back up at item 7B, which is Superintendent Comments. Okay, 7:12. 7B, Superintendent Comments.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. So just a couple of comments. At the last board meeting, the board approved a resolution acknowledging this week as School Administrators Week, and it's a different kind of week to celebrate in this time, but we are trying to do small things, both in our offices, our administrative, executive assistants are acknowledging school administrators, at least in the district office, and we're doing a special little to-go lunch for all of our other school administrators on Friday. So while we can't be in person, we still don't want to let this week go by without letting folks know they are appreciated. One public service announcement that we'll be promoting more, but the board should know and the public should know, is that the federal food nutrition program, student nutrition program, has extended the waiver for a seamless summer program, which basically is that any youth under the age of 18 may come and receive food that is being served. So we have our meal program up and going 2 days a week at most school sites or adjacent school sites. But now we know that that program may continue through June 30th. And so we'll take advantage of that flexibility and continue to do that. We do ask that families still fill out their free and reduced lunch application. Much of our funding, a great deal of our funding, is related to the number of students we have who qualify for free and reduced lunch. We do know that many families are experiencing hardship this year that they were not last year because lost jobs or lost fewer hours. And so we do ask that as many families as possible continue to fill that out, even though you don't need it to receive your lunch or your breakfast. The district does need it to be able to receive the funds to support our students and provide services. And lastly, the board might have received this under separate cover, but if not, you will get it on Friday. There is a grand jury report that was sent out for information on ransomware and how to protect ourselves and things to take into account. I will forward that to you if you did not get it under a separate cover. So pay attention to that. It's also on the grand jury, San Mateo County grand jury website if members of the public want to read that report. Thank you.
Thanks, Superintendent Vidales. Item 8A, consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item 8D. So since we have resolution, there's no resolutions on the consent.
That is correct.
Okay, great. So item 8D, resolution commending Pat Bone, retired executive director, Daly City Partnership. The administration recommends an appropriate resolution be prepared commending Pat Bone for her years of dedicated service at Daly City Partnership and to the students and community of Daly City and on the occasion of her retirement.
I would like to make the motion to approve the resolution as recommended by the administration for the wonderful service that Pat Bohm has contributed to our community.
Second?
Okay, motion and a second, and we need a roll call for this.
Mr. Clayton Koo,
Aye.
Ms. Maria Brizuela is absent. Ms. Mabel Manuel,
Aye.
Ms. Manufo Liainga Anoa'i,
Aye.
Mr. Shakil Ali.
Aye. Unanimously approved. And I would just like to say I really have appreciated all the years of working with Ms. Bone. I met her before I ran for the board, and she's always given more than enough of her time and effort and energy to help coordinate all types of wraparound services for our students and youth in Daly City. And it's going to be hard to fill her shoes. It's actually impossible, but we will move on and move forward. So looks like Mr. Valenti, did you want to say
Yeah, I
something?
wanted to say something. Interestingly enough, Pat Bohm and I worked together the first year I was here at John F. Kennedy. She worked as the paraprofessional in the class with me when I was a fourth grade teacher. And, I've known her so long and all the stuff she's done. And she just always seems to just be getting better and better. So I wish her the best of luck in her next endeavors. And I just wanted to, wish her, say goodbye. Thank you.
All right. Would anyone else? Yes, Ms. Anoa'i.
Yeah, I actually come from the Daly City Partnership family. And so I was there pre-Pat Bohm days, but stayed connected to the agency, and that's how we got to know each other, and the work that she's done in our community and even beyond the community. I mean, when Big Lift started, Daly City Partnership and JESD were the first two recipients, and that speaks volumes and is a testament to her lens of equity in the work that she does. And I just want to congratulate her for her many years of service in our community, and wish her well deserved for her to take a break and do what she'd like to do and has been holding on to. And we are definitely grateful to be able to celebrate her as a wonderful partner here in JESD. So congratulations, Pat, to all that you've done for all of our kids and our families here in the community.
All right, thank you for those remarks. Now we will go to item 9F. Let me make sure I don't skip it yet. 9F, resolution number 20-10-4A, availability of textbooks and instructional materials. The administration recommends approval of resolution number 20-10-14A that ensures students have enough textbooks and other instructional materials in each subject area that are consistent with their alignment to state content standards and most recent adoption cycles. And before we vote on that, Mr. Vidales, since we're in shelter in place, is there anything different about this resolution? Because it talks about textbooks and materials. Does that include anything that has to do with distance learning and equipment?
This resolution only pertains to those instructional materials that have been board adopted. And the board did adopt the instructional materials for the virtual school. So that's what's included.
All right. Yeah, I think
we modified it to include that.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, if there's no other questions or any deliberation, do we have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve the resolution as recommended by the administration.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion. It was seconded by Ms. Manio. All those in favor, we would need a roll call.
Yes, Mr. Koo got temporarily kicked out, so there he is. We'll take his vote in just a few seconds.
All right.
Ms. Marie Brizuela is absent. Ms. Mabel Manio,
Aye.
Ms. Manufa Liaina Anoa'i,
Aye.
Mr. Shakil Ali.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Clayton Koo, we're just voting on the instructional materials resolution. You have a vote? Yes? Okay, thank you.
Perfect timing. So that is unanimously approved. Item 10C, design, build, construction of the workforce housing project.
Yay. Well, we're finally here. It's a long road, and it's still a long road ahead of us because we expect to break ground, as you know, at the end of June. But we're very excited about it. And so we have our contract together so that we can move forward and get in line for design and get in line for the modular units, because we don't want to get held up with that. So I'm happy to answer questions that I can, but we also have Mr. Heath here, who's been working very closely with the team. There he is. He can also answer questions.
All right, I didn't read the description. So the administration recommends approval of a contract with C. Overa and Company for the design build services for construction of the workforce housing project with a not to exceed construction price of $27,420,682 and not to exceed design price of $547,752. The total contract is for an amount of $27,968,434. An additional 10% contingency will be included to cover work to address unforeseen conditions to be pre-approved by the district administration. And we have a summary of the proposed design build attached to our materials. This will be funded by Fund 21. So do we have any questions or any deliberations from board members?
I could make a comment on being in the real estate business that Overa is a very well-known construction company. They build parts of San Jose Airport, San Pablo City Hall. They helped build an elementary school, I think, in Albany. So they do a lot of these major type of public agency builds. So I believe in their competency and their capability to definitely help us out. So whoever chose that, good choice.
All right, thank you. So if there's no other deliberation or questions, would anyone like to make the motion?
I'd like to make the motion, but I wanted to just ask one quick question on the timeline. I support it, but on the timeline under that Article 3 area, is that something that we still see that we're able to keep considering the pandemic?
Mr. Heath, would you like to address
So
that?
clarify what you're talking about, the timeline.
It says time to complete and liquidated damages. There's this calendar set in here. where it shows October 14th is today, but then you've got dates for completing the design, the drawing, November 30th, and then finalizing the construction price on the 31st. Is that timeline, do you see any delays in that, or do we believe that that timeline can still be intact despite the pandemic?
We believe that that timeline will very much be intact. We've worked over the last couple of weeks with Overa and our architect to put this timeline together prior to it coming to the board. We've had extensive meetings, and a lot of the design build, the design concept can be done remotely. And then they're very good, Overa and a lot of the other contractors are very good about following the COVID protocols on the actual construction site.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Heath, and for all of your leadership in making sure this continues to move forward. We've been waiting for the opportunity to vote on this. So I proudly make the motion that we approve this as recommended by the administration.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that's unanimously approved. Congratulations, everyone. Let's see. Okay, item 10D. Wait. Thought we did that one.
No, it was a public hearing.
Okay, that's right. I was like, why does it look the same? So 10D, resolution number 20-10-14, adoption of increase in school facility fee. The administration recommends adoption of board resolution number 20-10-14, increase in the statutory school facilities fee, level 1 fee, on new residential construction and reconstruction at $4.08 per square foot, and commercial/industrial development at 66 cents per square foot. The proposed fees are authorized by Education Code Section 17620 and Government Code Section 65995. The adoption of the increase of the level 1 fee is necessary to fund the construction of needed school facilities to accommodate growth due to development.
So this is a semi-annual routine item. We increase it every other year as the state increases our ability to do that. And actually, we didn't even have to go out for a full in-depth study because our last report was our need was high enough that covered the increase for this report too. So it was just a review as opposed to a full study. So this is really helpful for the district. The FDR new wing and the Fernando new wing were in part funded by the developer fees that we have, as well as the central kitchen. So we've spent those funds down, and so it's our opportunity to build them up. Any questions?
I'm not sure if you answered how does the state determine, so the state studies the population growth for our district or something like that, or?
What happens is the state determines what the cost of facilities would be to make facilities, to build them. And then it allows that to be charged when people pull permits or companies pull permits, like when the Lennar did the construction and they have to pay a fee, a developer fee for that. And we share ours with the high school district. So we get 60%, the high school gets 40%. And so, and what happens is a developer fee study determines what our need is, what the district's need is. And our need is greater than what the state is allowing. And so it's easy to push it up to the maximum limit that the state is allowing.
All right. That was an excellent explanation. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions or anything?
I had a quick question. Ms. Kessler, is this only applicable to new school facilities and it doesn't apply to the workforce housing project? It's only to new school facilities?
It's to accommodate increased enrollment in actually, or our need to maintain our facilities for the enrollment that we have as it gets run down. So it's not for workforce housing at all. No, it has to be for facilities for students.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I guess now I have one more question. Is it tied in any way into the average daily attendance?
It's tied to enrollment.
All right. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion for the approval of resolution number 20-10-14 as recommended by the administration.
Does it have to be roll call? Sorry.
Yes, you're right.
Yes, it will be roll call. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Ali, you ready for the roll call?
If you all can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Clayton Koo,
Aye.
Ms. Marie Brizuela is absent. Ms. May Belmanio. Ms. Manufalienga Anoa'i.
Aye.
Mr. Shakil Ali. Is frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Okay, so am I still frozen?
No, your visual is off, but we can hear you. So
I turned off the camera to just see if that will.
yeah, sometimes that helps. So we just need your vote on that item.
All right, aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so is that unanimous?
Unanimous of everybody here, yes.
All right, and I think, was that Mr. Koo that seconded?
That's correct.
All right, great. Item 10E, surplus property process and review. The administration will provide information on the surplus property process and review the current status of JESD properties.
So if I could share my screen.
Can you use the button at the bottom of that says share screen? Does it work for you?
Oh, okay. All right, well, that's, okay, let me pull it up first then, how's that? Oh, yeah. Nope, sorry.
You can't?
Oh my goodness. Are you seeing my screen here?
No.
Okay. All right, let me try it now. Oh.
Julie, do you want me to go ahead? Oh,
There you go.
How's that? You
Okay.
got it. Okay. So I'm glad I have a printed copy because I can't actually see the entire screen. Okay, so I want to give a brief overview of the surplus property process as well as the current status of district properties. I think I'm gonna have to do this manual. Okay, so the first thing to do is to determine if there are any properties that should be considered for surplus. And often administration will bring something forward. Board members might bring something forward. Once it's determined that there are properties that the district would like to consider for it, then the community needs to be involved, and the community has to be involved before any board action can be taken. The the board would establish the committee. It's an advisory committee, and it's known as the 7-11 committee because it's between 7 and 11 members. The board appoints those members, and those members should reflect the community. We should bring forward to that community the properties that we're interested in them reviewing. We can offer them to review all the properties, but we can also just give them specific properties. The committee, the charge of the committee is to review the projected enrollment of the district as well as other pertinent data, and then to prioritize acceptable uses of the properties according to the community, and they should share that out with the community. They should then have a public hearing with the community so that the community can discuss their feelings about it, like any public hearing. And then once the committee has determined what those uses could be, what would be acceptable, they come to the board with recommendations. Now, it is an advisory committee only, so they don't actually have the ability to make any decisions on behalf of the district. So let's say there was a property that the board does want to surplus for some reason. The first thing to do would be to declare the property as surplus property, and action must be taken to do so at a regular board meeting. The next step is to put out an RFQ to find a qualified school district broker, somebody who will work. This is a really important part. This is where legal counsel says districts get themselves in trouble when they've got a broker that doesn't, number one, understand the surplus property process. Two, that broker should have experience representing government agencies. And three, they should have a clear knowledge of the education code's procedures. I'm hoping this is the right page here. Okay. So what can you do with the money once you, oh, I'm sorry, I think I skipped something here. I did, I'm sorry. Because it went to the end of my page. After you get a RFQ and you've determined what broker is going to best serve the district, you want to adopt a resolution to sell or lease the property, if that's what you wanted to do. And the resolution must include the minimum price, the terms of the contract that you would expect, the broker's commission, the bidding timeline, as well as other information. And the process must support competitive bidding. And we would then award it to the highest responsible bidder. Usually, we're always talking about lowest responsible bidder. That's because when we're paying for something, but when we're selling something, we want the highest responsible bidder. We then also have to follow the Naylor Act, which requires us to notify Parks and Recs and other agencies that would use the land for basically public recreation. And then that would, if an agency was interested in it, it would have to go out at the price level that is determined by basically your purchase price and some increases, but you cannot negotiate the sales price. And the only option the board has is to let it go for the price that's determined by statute, or to pull that property back and say, no, we've changed our mind, we don't want to sell it or lease it. Then the last part would be to notify other government agencies, including the housing agency, for possible use if they need it. But the outcome of this is negotiable, and we don't have to sell it or lease it for any kind of statute amount. So if a property is sold or leased, there are limitations to how you can use the proceeds. In this case, if the property is leased with a option of buying later on, then it has to be, the proceeds have to be used for capital outlay. Unless the state allocation board approves you to do otherwise, and that would be dependent on, number one, that you have no use for the properties for at least a 10-year period, and you have no use for the school facilities program funds for 10 years. And so you relinquish your ability to get those funds. Now, we have used those funds in the past, and we are currently using those funds. So, but if you have that, a 10-year period that you can say you don't need properties and you don't need any state facilities funds to help maintain properties, then they can approve a waiver, in which case you could use it for operations. Now, if the property is for lease, for short-term lease, then there are no statute limitations on how the proceeds can be used. And so right now, as we lease, rent out, lease properties, those funds come into the general fund and can be used for any purpose. Get to the next page here. So I wanted to just show you this. This is a little bit of history. In 2004, 7-Eleven committee convened, and this top part of the slide shows what their recommendations to the board was at that time. And then in 2011, the committee convened again and came up with some new recommendations. They were very close to the old ones. General Pershing, no, not General Pershing, Daniel Webster, which was originally in the 2004 recommendations for the northerly, by the hill, the grassy area over there, for sale or lease. And then at this last 2011 7-Eleven committee meeting, they removed the sale part and just kept the lease part in their recommendations. The only other change, I believe, was the maintenance yard, which was for a grounds lease, and then it became for a short-term lease. So this shows the actions that were taken by the board for different properties. And this was back in 2012. Well, this was an update in 2012 as to what had been done. But as you see up top here, this Christopher Columbus property has been sold. But you see the resolutions were taken to lease or sell the property. And the original one was done in, I can't tell that date here, in 2008, and then again in 2011, because there was quite a lot of time passed by. And if you go out once and it doesn't work out right, then you want to pass another resolution, because now you've got maybe different terms in what you're wanting to get, your contract terms, your commission price, your minimum price in 2008 would be different than a minimum price in 2011 as it would be in 2020. So these are all the different actions taken, and I believe the next slide I've got more an update where we've gotten rid of, like, Christopher Columbus, it's now gone. So this is what we're left with today. Colma was surplused, and we went out in 2008. We went out for leasing. We didn't go out for selling, but we went out for leasing a 60-year lease. And it's 4.4 acres. The board took it back because when we were entertaining different offers, there was nothing that was really very beneficial to the district. Another big thing about the Colma property is back then, the Colma property and Policita property are one property, and we tried to divide it. We spent 18 months working with a surveyor who was going to help us to go to the city and divide the property up. We were never able to do that, and we gave up after 18 months of trying. So if we were to sell or lease the property for a long-term lease, like maybe they were going to tear the stuff down and rebuild, we would need to have that done first. And of course, we would put that into, or I'm sorry, we would recommend putting that into the resolution, because otherwise, for whoever was interested in it to work on that process and do that process. Again, it took 18 months and we didn't get anywhere with it. So that's the Colma property. The Daniel Webster property, again, it's kind of like a flagpole lot. It's the area that has been surplused is in back. In the past, we've had some interest in it, but some problems that have occurred there are the ingress egress, getting to and from that location. And then because we were entertaining some leases, and a lot of them were for like, I think some sporting things, maybe it wasn't a soccer field, something, I'm not sure what it was. But we also had to make sure that it didn't conflict with our school schedule when our students were being dropped off and picked up. So that property, the board decided to remove it from offering it in 2015. And then there was a maintenance yard. Now a lot has happened to the maintenance yard since 2011, when it was originally put out for lease, and where that area of 1.38 acres is now the area that houses our solar panels, which we use and generates a lot of energy and supports the maintenance yard as well as the central kitchen. Additionally, in 2011, when this was brought forward, it was the same time that the Christopher Columbus property was brought forward. We were in the process of moving the central kitchen to the maintenance yard. So now the central kitchen is there as well, not in this particular area, but it's there, and our employees, we have employee parking in the parking lot and also district parking of vehicles that are underneath the solar panels. So we've been using that property a lot. All right, I'm trying to figure out what slide. I can't seem to just enter. So I have some maps of each of the properties. This is a map of the Colma property. And then the TRP is over here. So this is the boundaries that we were trying to separate out, but couldn't. It's a very desirable property. We are currently, we have some tenants in there, so we are leasing out rooms. We have a couple preschools there. The district also uses some of the rooms. And well, this is what that property looks like. Then we come to the Daniel Webster property. And as you can see, here's that flagpole area here. And there is we looked in a potential way before of coming from a driveway over here, but there's quite a slope there. And then the other way, like I said, would be to come down this road and come in through here. And we can discuss that more in depth if you have some questions about that. The final property is the maintenance yard and central kitchen. So here's where the maintenance department is, and the central kitchen, and our freezer. and our employees park here, and there's some parking out here too. So our solar paneling is all out here. That is the overview, and I'd be happy to go and answer questions as much as I can, and to determine if you would like us to move forward with anything, but mostly to answer your questions right now.
All right, thank you for that presentation. Do any board members have any questions?
Hi, I do. I have a few actually. Thank you so much, Ms. Kessler, for that presentation. I just wanted to know, one, what is the difference between regular surplus and exempt? In the other material that was sent, it stated that some things aren't required. What are those?
Right, okay. And thank you for bringing up the other materials that are there. The other materials are from our attorneys who put this out for all of their clients. And it's got a lot of information on it, very helpful information. The exempt means that we don't have to do all the things that other agencies might have to do, but all the things that I mentioned, we're not exempt from those. So they would be, and I don't know all the things that we'd be exempt from because there's not a need for us to do them. But the things that I've listed here are required.
Okay, so the documentation also states that Park and Rec needs to be given the opportunity for 60 days, but you mentioned in your presentation that housing as well. Is that a specific housing agency, and do they also get those same 60 days? Is it concurrent with Park and Rec?
So no, the Park and Rec falls under the Naylor Act. And that's the one that falls in this situation where if they want to use it, then we can't negotiate a price. With the housing authority, that falls under the other government agencies. And then we can negotiate a price and we can say, no, your price is too low. We're going to offer it out to the general public. But we do have to send them the notices and give them the opportunity to make offers and negotiate in good faith to the point where we feel it would be in the district's best interest, or should I say the board felt it would be in the district's best interest. Otherwise, they don't have a hold on us. But the Parks and Rec and other agencies of that sort, they do have, there is no negotiating.
And is there community input if Housing Authority does have interest in it?
You know, I can't say for sure. I suppose when the 7-Eleven committee meets and they had decided, like say it was the Colma property or the Daniel Webster property, they may come back and say, you know, the Daniel Webster property, we would recommend for lease or sale, but the uses for that sale, we do not recommend that it be housing. It would, you know, I don't know what they might say, but they would have that opportunity to say it then. But they also, and this was an experience we had when we sold the Colma property, because the 7-Eleven committee met for that and said, go ahead, sell it. But then the company that wanted to purchase it and build it, they had to work with the community a lot as well. And because the city was not going to allow them to do something that they felt that the community would not support.
So the community input is at varied levels, Ms. Mario. One is with the 7-Eleven committee when they're reviewing the property. Second, Another community input opportunity is when the board takes action to declare surplus or not. That's again, and as Ms. Kessler indicated, it doesn't say anything about uses unless we specify at those times. But then through the permitting process in the city, that's where community input is given. And usually, as was the case with our Christopher Columbus site, it was, I forget what the word is, but it was a contingency that they received permits for wanting this particular project. And they could not receive those permits. And so then they had to pull out of the offer. So anyway, so those are the different aspects of community input when we're moving in that direction.
Okay, so it's not like a carte blanche just because it's a public agency. One last question, sorry, Ms. Kessler.
No.
Could we apply for the waiver for the funds before we lease or sell, if we decide to, so that we can go into recreational funds or wherever?
I would think yes. I mean, I would have to research that, but I would believe so. Yeah, I would certainly.
Although if we would want to forego any state facility of funding, considering the state of many of our facilities, we know that we have needs there for the next 10 years. And it would basically mean we're going to forego any funding available from state construction bonds. It may even mean that we're not going to do a measure to rebuild any of our facilities for the next 10 years. So I think that it's a risky, if we had all brand new buildings, like we're in a new community and we just have excess land and we built all our buildings from brand new in the last 5 years, then I can see us saying yes, but our buildings are 50 to 60 years old in many cases. So we probably would not be the wisest thing to do.
But the waiver is so that we don't have to forego those funds, correct?
The waiver basically states we want to use these for general fund purposes for a one-time purchase or one-time use.
One-time use.
And we say we do not have any construction or building needs for the next 10 years, which I don't think we can say.
Not at this time, anyway.
Yeah, not at this time, yeah.
Oh, I totally agree. I misunderstood them. So the waiver doesn't stop that. I thought it did.
The waiver would basically tie the hands of a future board and administration with any kind of a building project seeking either state funds or local construction funds.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from any other board members? No? Okay, I want to thank you once again, Ms. Kessler, for this presentation. This is actually an important aspect of what we're able to do as a school district. I believe in our city, in our district, we own the most real estate. So people are always going to be looking at our facilities and our land and have ideas about it. So it's good to know that we have a robust process that we follow in regards to that.
My pleasure.
Let's see. Are we already at item 13?
Yes, we are. 13A.
Yep. Item 13A, board policies, administrative regulations. The board will review and revise board policies / administrative regulations from July 2020 CSBA board policy revisions as stated in a second reading. Do we have any discussion on this? No? Okay. Do we have a motion then?
I'll make a motion that we approve the second reading of Board Policy Administrative Regulations for July 2020 CSBA Board Policy revisions as stated.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimously approved. Item 14A, Board Governance Matters. Return to in-school instruction. The board will receive information on current return to school guidelines, district readiness actions, and consider recommendations for adopting criteria to utilize in considering a reopening process when local health conditions allow.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Dr. Joyner, if you wouldn't mind sharing the screen, please, the presentation. This process was very helpful, and I'll explain a little bit of how I've processed all of this information. But looking back at the last 7 months has been helpful. You know, March 13th, we were ordered by the San Mateo County Health Department and other Bay Area health departments to go into at-home learning, modified school operations. As a result, you know, we stayed in those modified school operations for the remainder of the year. 3 weeks first, and then another 4 weeks, and then the remainder of the year, which I think was like 5 or 6 weeks at the end. We didn't move into it all at once. It was gradual, 3, 4, and 6. And during that time, you know, we started to meet with our constituents and stakeholders to begin to discuss, you know, what would it look like for us to come out. San Mateo County released their pandemic recovery framework for schools during that time. California Department of Public Health also released their guidance for schools. And when the board met in the middle of June, I think it might have been the June 16th meeting, the board received a presentation and moved toward a hybrid, implementing a hybrid model with an option for 100% virtual school. Now, I remember that meeting, and I remember feeling at that time that the conditions were really good. San Mateo County and the Bay Area was on the right path toward trying to tame the virus spread. They flattened the curve. Positivity rates were down. Infection rates were down. And I kid you not, the day after that meeting, on June 17th and 18th and 19th, positivity rates, infections started to go up and continued to go up through July to the point where when the board met on July 22nd, the spread of the virus was rampant in the Bay Area and in San Mateo County. And at that point, the board voted to switch from a short-term distance learning option into a longer-term one, 6 weeks at least. And that was going to bring us up until the end of September. Now, during that time, San Mateo County fell into what was first termed the state's watch list. It was on the state's watch list because it didn't meet a variety of measures, namely the positivity rates of all the tests given in the county were too high, or too many new case counts, or too many of the beds in the hospital were being occupied by COVID patients, too many ICU patients. You know, there were 6 different measures that counties were being measured on. And San Mateo County did not meet those measures and was placed on a watch list, which meant that schools were not allowed to reopen in person while the county was on that watch list. So we began on August 19th and distance learning for everybody, as the board directed and as the state required. We were not able to offer in-person instruction at all. And we implemented that, and we've had lots of experiences with distance learning. It took a while to ramp up into it. We trained our staff. They rolled out the beginning of the school year. They've been providing instruction in this format. There are challenges for sure, but it's moving along relatively well. It's not as good, and a lot of students falling through the cracks, but we are doing much better than we did last March and April with how we're serving our students. So in October, as we reached the end of the 6 weeks, and as the state was moving San Mateo County off the watch list, we began to plan again, to take up our planning, I should say, from where we left off for returning to in-school instruction. And so today's presentation is sort of an update on that process and our latest recommendations, my latest recommendations for the board to consider for when and how we should return to in-person learning. You would advance the slide, please. All right, so we now have, instead of a watch list, no watch list segmentation of counties in California, we now have what's called the Blueprint for Economic Recovery. It's 4 color-coded tiers of determining the virus presence in different counties, moving from a purple level, which is termed widespread, to the yellow level, which is termed minimal. It's defined by 2 different metrics. Instead of the 6 metrics that were hard to understand, these are 2 simple to understand metrics. One is the average daily new cases in a county per 100,000 of population. You see there that if you have more than 7 average new daily cases in a county per 100,000 residents, you would be in the purple level. If you had fewer and you were also had a test positivity rate of less than 8%, you could be placed in the red level. So you have to meet, a county has to meet both metrics for that level in order to be placed in that level. Now, a third metric was just added a week or 2 ago, and this is one that I feel very good about and feel strong about. It's called the health equity measure, health equity, which basically takes the the lowest 25% of census tracts in the county and aggregates their test positivity results and says that not only must the county move forward in this, but your poorest communities must also benefit from that. I think there are some examples of some counties in California that were doing really well, but the most under-resourced communities were not doing very well. They were not getting the testing that was needed. They were not being able to tame the virus as well as the rest of the county. So that's a third measure. So now all 3 measures have to be met in order to move or advance in the tiered system. That's not to say it's no longer possible to move forward. In fact, this last week, 2 more Bay Area counties moved forward into the orange level. San Francisco is also in the orange level. And every Tuesday, the counties are reevaluated and moved forward or backwards, as happened a couple of weeks ago. A couple counties had to move back because they saw positivity rates increasing or more new cases per day. A county has to stay when it advances. Honestly, this sounds just like a game board. So instruction, so if you like game boards and you like to play these games, you read this document and you feel like you're playing this game. So in order to advance to a new level, you have to meet those criteria for 2 weeks. And then you have to stay in that level for 3 weeks before you can move another level. So really it's like 5 weeks of meeting the criteria for that level or better if you want to move forward. And that's where we are. San Mateo County right now is currently in the red level, the substantial level of spread. It's been at this tier for 4 weeks. The case rate currently is a 4.7 average new daily cases per 100,000. So very close to the fewer than 4% that fewer than 4 that the county needs to have to be considered for orange tier. It has a 2.5% positivity rate. So its positivity rate puts it squarely in the orange tier. However, because their new average daily cases is not there, we remain in the red level. And then with the new health equity index metric, the lowest 25% of the census tracts in our county, the positivity rate is 4.8. So it's roughly twice the rate of the rest of the county. And that's where I feel very good that metric is being has been put into place, because that metric very closely can represent many parts of our community, but not just our community, but throughout the county. There are sections of under-resourced individuals who haven't necessarily benefited from all of the increased testing that we're starting to see, and are now just recently, because it will hold, because this rate will hold the county back from advancing. I believe the county is looking at these census tracts more carefully and saying, let's make sure that they have access to the testing and the resources that are available to bring this virus under control in their community as much as it is in other communities. Can we move forward, please? So, remember we talked about the watch list that was replaced. So San Mateo County has been placed in the red tier, and it needed to stay in that tier for 2 or more weeks in order for schools to be allowed to reopen. Now the county met that measure on October 6th. Schools, and prior to that, in the purple stage, schools could open with a waiver. In the red tier, schools don't need a waiver. They're allowed to reopen. They do need to have a plan for reopening, and it does need to be approved by the County Office of Education and reviewed and approved by the San Mateo Department of Health. So our district, at the end of September, beginning of October, began to consolidate and pull together all of the conversations that have been had, and to not make any new decisions per se, but just bring in parts of the pandemic recovery framework that need to be included in a return to school plan. The county also came out with a framework for what a plan needs to include that was not previously released until about the end of September. So next slide, and I think that's Dr. Joyner. You can begin.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So to continue, as Bernie was saying, the county did come out with a plan for us, and on October 5th, we met with the county, and they provided a webinar that provided instructions and guidance on how we can return. And so, as Bernie said, we have to come up with a plan, and this is just a piece of what the county is identifying, or is identifying what should be a part of the plan. And so this checklist is one of the areas that we will be covering within our plan, along with using the pandemic recovery framework. So this is just a little bit of the plan. And I don't want to go over all of this, but once we do get our plan in place and it's approved by the board, then we have to have it approved by the county office and the county health department. So our plan that we are working on is one full plan that will speak to our entire community. So not only will it speak to our staff, but it will speak to our families and all stakeholders involved. So we are putting together one full plan, and then each site has been asked to make their own individual plan, which will connect to our plan. And each individual site has to take part, will pull from that checklist as well. So all plans will be similar in nature, but focused in on the individual site. So our district plan, again, is based off of the checklist, but it's grounded in our district's 3 guiding principles, which is ensuring the health and safety of all students, staff, and the community at large, and ensuring that we provide excellent academic instruction to our students, and also fostering social emotional well-being for students, staff, and families. So all 3 of these areas will be addressed in our plan, as well as we will focus on the 4 pillars from the pandemic recovery framework. So once our committee consolidates all this information, and we do have a timeline, by the end of October, we will begin to reconvene the district committees that we started in the summer, so that they can take a look at the plan that we're putting forward, so we can get feedback. And these district committees will include teachers and parents. The school sites are convening their own committees, and for the middle schools, we've asked, if students, 8th graders preferably, could take part in listening and giving feedback on the plan. So once we reconvene the district committee, we'll then post it on our website for families to give feedback on the plan as well. So the California Department of Public Health published rules that support bringing small cohorts of students back to school sites for in-person instruction and/or support. And those rules are focused on students with the most acute needs. So we don't need a waiver for this, but we can identify small cohorts of students with acute needs. And so at the moment, we are working on a plan that would allow for sites to support identified students. And that plan is going to incorporate the rules, again, based on the California Department of Health and the pandemic recovery framework. And so once we put that plan together, sites can then fill it out and then get approval from Bernie, and can then go forward. And again, these are just small groups of students, not grade levels, but again, students who have acute needs. You're muted.
I got it. So I think, as I mentioned, the last 6-7 months have been a time of learning for all of us. For me, I was just reflecting, I read about 5 to 6 news articles every day on the virus, on its presence in our communities, on different ways that cities and states and school districts are approaching returning to, I'm not going to say normal, because there won't be a normal. It's going to be a new normal, but when it happens. So I've learned a lot. And so some of the recommendations that you'll hear from me tonight will be based on some of this learning and some of the reading that I've done. So what might be the steps to returning to in-person instruction? And they're bulleted, they're not numbered because they're not sequential. Many of them are happening concurrently. And the hope is that they all coalesce and come together at some point toward the end of the process. But as Dr. Joyner mentioned, we do need to complete a district return to in-person instruction plan. Again, we're just consolidating all of the information gained from the summer in the pandemic recovery framework that we can cut and paste and adapt to our school district, get feedback from stakeholders, parents, teachers, other employees and staff into that to make sure that we can address some of the areas that maybe we might be missing. Then again, sites take that district plan and then adapt it and develop school-specific plans. There's sections in there like how will students come onto campus? How will students leave campus? How will you stagger the day so that you don't have a glut of students at one particular time? So all of those are things that each school site needs to consider and make decisions about. Very difficult for a district level committee to make those decisions for a school like Ben Franklin and Tierra Policita and Garden Village. Each of them are going to have a different approach to this. But we all know they do all need to stagger, and they all need to think about how students come into campus and leave campus to make sure that students don't cluster for too long. We also need to, and we're in process of completing agreements with our employee groups for what does it mean for working conditions about when we return to in-person instruction. So that is in process. And then findings from that or outcomes from that are then put into the return to in-person instruction plan at the district level. The district needs to equip our classrooms and our schools with personal protective equipment and other mitigation measures or supplies. I'll show you a slide of everything we've acquired. We have not yet distributed these supplies to school sites. We will distribute them when we're about 2 weeks out. We understand life is crazy at schools, and if we had sent these supplies to schools at the end of August, by the time we needed them, whenever that might be, someone said, I wonder where it is. I know it came and it was first in the office, then we had to move it, and it's probably in this classroom, and it's not in that classroom. So we're holding on to them, and we will start to send them out to schools once we have a more specific time when they will be needed. Briefly mentioned earlier is that the district needs to arrange for regular COVID-19 testing, need to develop a program, and currently I'm in the process and in conversation with a testing company that will be able to provide that for us. The nice thing is that this testing company is approved as a vendor for our 2 employee insurance companies. So we don't have to exchange any funds. They will bill directly. And that's a nice thing. Other programs, sometimes the district pays a bit, and then employees apply for reimbursement, and then the employees return the money to the district. It's just very complicated. This is just a direct bill. So that makes it good. It is a company that's being used by other school districts and being used by San Mateo County. So that at least is helpful, and used by many other states. So here's the slide on the some of the personal protective equipment that we have. We have over 8,000 facial coverings. These are the disposable types. We don't provide a fresh one to everybody every day. It's just available for families, students, staff who need it. I know we were talking before the meeting about how easy it is to forget our facial coverings in our homes. We will have sufficient to be able to give folks some who might need it, or, as I've discovered, they break or they get dirty, and we need replacements. And so we'll have sufficient to get us started, and we have a supply that will get us new supplies within 3 to 4 days of ordering. So that's helpful. We also purchased reusable cloth face coverings, 2 for every staff member. And some of those have been distributed, staff members who've been on campus. might have already received them. If not, they will receive them as we get ready to return. We also have on hand 678 facial shields. There are staff who feel more comfortable with the facial shield in addition to a face covering. Many folks have their own, but we have those for staff who are required to have a close contact either with each other or with the student, or they just request one. Now, hand sanitizer and cleaning supplies, we have so much hand sanitizer. Thousands and thousands and thousands of bottles of hand sanitizer. One for every classroom. Cleaning supplies for each classroom, both with wipes as well as sprays and rags. We're all set for that. We're in the process of purchasing and acquiring fans, air purifiers, filters for improved ventilation in our classrooms and our workspaces. So that's just some of the mitigation measures that we've taken. One of the readings or many of the readings I have done just talk about how important facial coverings are to preventing the spread of this disease. And over, the research and the findings are that when facial coverings are used by everyone, if not most everybody, the virus has very little advantage to take of anybody or anyone. So that's something that we really need to put into our plan. And you know, even though it may not be required for certain ages, we know, and because I've seen it, our community feels very strongly about facial coverings. I go to the store and I see kids as young as 3 and 4 walking, though they're not required to wear facial coverings, they are. And our community has moved to expecting our children to wear facial coverings as well. Next slide. So here's my recommendation. My recommendation is not a date, but a set of conditions. Now, we've heard many school districts say, we're opening November 15th. We're gonna open December 1st. We're gonna open October 19th or October 12th. About a third of San Mateo County elementary school districts have announced an opening date. Those that are far off into the future, they're just announcing a date without regard to any of the health conditions. And we've always said we want to open when it is safe to do so, when local health conditions allow. And while I know I have said those words, it's always bothered me that we've never defined what that means. And if we say we're going to open when it's safe to do so, you have 100 people, 100 people will give you 100 different answers of what that means. So my recommendation is that we begin to define what that means at minimum. You have folks who say, it's safe to do so, schools never should have closed, schools should be open, there's no danger in schools opening. That's at one extreme. And then we have another extreme of folks who might say, it's so dangerous, we need to wait until there's a vaccine, 100% of the people have been vaccinated, and we have 0 infections before we can start school again. Now we know that neither one of those is completely true. And we know that the answer lies somewhere in the middle. The state of California has said schools may start to reopen with a waiver at any point. If you are able to put in certain mitigation measures into your plan and you're approved by your local health department, then you can open. And they've also said that once your county is in the red tier, you can open based on the of your local county. So my set of conditions that I will put forth for the board to consider adopting are such. We are so close to San Francisco County that it's hard to separate our data from their data because we're right next to them. We're closer to all of San Francisco County than we are to most of San Mateo County. So my recommendation is that both San Mateo and San Francisco counties are at least in the moderate tier of reopening, orange. Now I say at least, it doesn't mean that that's when it's going to happen. It's just at least we're in the orange tier. We're out of the red, right? Second condition that I've considered and I'll give you a little bit of history on how I came to this. Both San Mateo and San Francisco counties have less than 3% test positivity rates. Now, if you remember, it's the lower level of the orange tier. The orange tier starts, I think, at about 5%. It's at the bottom of that tier. It ends at 2%. How did I arrive at 3%? Did I pull that number out of the hat? Neither. And in my reading, I've noticed that very few people were speaking about that. At some point in August, the health commissioner of New York City started to talk about test positivity rates and feeling that at a 3% positivity rate is in a community is a good level to consider reopening schools. Randy Weingarten, who is the president of the AFT National Organization, the national organization that our employees belong to, she started off the summer saying 5% was what was needed in order to reopen schools, but by the end of the summer, she had switched her analysis and assessment and started to say that 3% was what was needed. So given that, AFT is based in New York, so given that the health commissioner in New York and the AFT president is also, or spends a lot of time in New York, coming up with this number, and they are the region that has suffered the most from this virus, I have taken their words very heavily, and I'm recommending that both San Mateo and San Francisco counties reach that level. Now, you saw on the earlier slides that San Mateo and San Francisco counties have already reached that. San Mateo, what did I say, was maybe 2.4%. San Francisco just registered a 1% positivity rate. So it is possible, and it becomes more and more possible the more often we test and the more that testing is available. The other one that I have is, if everyone's going to be at least 2%, then for sure, I want to make sure that San Mateo County's health equity measure is at least 3%. As I mentioned, we may I don't know where these census tracts are, but I do know that much of our community might be represented in that lower 25% quartile of census tracts, and I would say at least 3% for that measure as well. Now, the last one is everybody likes their data to be as local as possible. And I've had conversations with the health department on this, and dissuading, too much local data, because COVID is a regional issue. It's not just a San Mateo County issue. It's not just a Northern Peninsula issue. It is a region-wide issue. It's a Bay Area issue. But it is very important to many in our community to have local data. So what I'm proposing is that also we have a Daly City measure that says the new weekly cases in Daly City is fewer than 30, so 29 or less. And if you calculate that out, Daly City's population currently at the last measure was 107,000. So it's about, a 3% positivity of new cases in Daly City. We are probably furthest from this measure than any other measure. A couple of weeks ago, we were at 70 some. The last 2 weeks, we've been slightly over 40. I'm hoping that in the next few weeks that the new cases measure will begin to drop. But I'm gonna guess that as testing improves, the new cases, because we're gonna find more and more of the asymptomatic cases that people don't have symptoms. We'll find more of those. And so for a while, I think it'll go up. But then that means as it goes up, more people will self-quarantine, and then there'll be a minimizing of the spread, and then it'll go down. So once the board approves these set of conditions in general, I will provide the board updates at each board meeting on where we are on this. I will also create sort of a dashboard on our district website where we can say, we've met this one, we are here, we have not met that one. Sort of our own color-coded system. I'll move, well, I don't know what we'll do. I've thought about the color coding, but there's too many colors. You know, there's smoke, there's the tears of reopening. It may get too much, but it is simple. So we'll consider something in terms of displaying of where we are with that. So next slide, please. So the next steps, I would want the board to discuss and consider the health conditions recommendations, approve them if you can, or, you know, say we want to open January 1st, give us a date. I caution against setting a date. We don't know what the conditions will be January 1st. I don't want to reopen January 1st if we're in a worse place than we are today. I only want to open when we at least meet minimally the conditions that I've put out there. We have in our goals, we have that we want to safeguard the health of our community. Our community, many of our students live in multi-generational homes, grandparents all the way to infants, all in one home. Our neighborhoods are denser than other parts of the Bay Area. And so reopening schools, we need to really take that into account and consider how reopening schools in our community can be an aspect of protecting the health of our community, especially the older adults living with or near our students. We don't want Jefferson Elementary School District returning to in-school instruction to be the catalyst for the spread of virus. And so that's something that I take very, very seriously. And I do not want to play any part in that. I think that the recommendations laid out will minimize that. It does not eliminate it, but it does provide a good mitigation. And then lastly, and we'll do this at an upcoming board meeting as we're completed, approve the return to in-person instruction. That needs to be completed whether we reopen in December or we reopen in March. We do need to have this plan completed. It's independent of time, and as it gets approved, we'll have it ready. And when the conditions are right, we'll submit it for review and approval. And then we can announce a return date if the conditions don't worsen. Now, if what happened in June happens again today, we'll be seeing a rise in cases and positivity rates in the Bay Area in the next 2 weeks. And then, you know, we shelve this whole process. But if the Bay Area, specifically San Mateo and San Francisco counties, continue in the trajectory that we're on, we can see reopening, you know, the conditions, I should say, we can see the conditions being met as early as, I would guess, end of November, maybe even beginning of December. Things go wacky and haywire, we'll have to start over. So I believe that if we adopt the conditions, we will be among the last elementary school districts to open in San Mateo County. We certainly are not among the first. I do not think we'll be in the middle pack. I think we'll be among the last. So that's something that you also want to consider, and you can move at some point if it's March and we have not reopened and we're the last district who hasn't reopened, and all the other districts have reopened and they're moving along well and they're not spreading the infection. They're able to keep it under control. And our students are the only ones that are not able to meet because of our conditions are too stringent. You know, we can come back to this in January or February and say, let's relax this a little bit. We shot too high. It's not possible. I don't think that right now. I might change my mind if it is end of January and we're the last district to reopen because everybody else has opened successfully before us and our students are missing out. in-person instruction. So now the board, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know that we have some speaker cards on this item. I don't know when you want to entertain those.
Let's go over the speaker cards first, if that's all right.
Yep. So Ms. Manio and Mr. Koo, if you guys would alternate, I think we have a chunk for this.
Should I go first?
Yes.
I have a speaker card from Wendy Lau, third grade teacher. Dear JESD board members, I hope this finds you well. I'm writing to address my concerns regarding the possible reopening of schools in November. I understand there are many of us who prefer to have school in person, and there is no denying that it would alleviate some of the hardships that parents, teachers, and students are all currently experiencing with distance learning. However, I feel that it would be more prudent to reopen slowly and cautiously in the new year rather than in November. One concern is reopening during the start of flu season. According to CDC, influenza activity often starts to increase in October. Returning to school at the start of flu season would be an additional factor of stress, particularly since both viruses cause similar symptoms and it is possible to be infected by both viruses simultaneously. Also, given the long holiday breaks we have in these last 2 months of the year, it can be difficult for everyone to adjust to a completely new and logistically complex routine. Even before the pandemic, students often had difficulty adjusting back to school routines after holiday breaks like Thanksgiving and winter break. Considering we have to introduce drastically new procedures for all parts of the school and day, trying to establish consistency and routine in students' schools' lives will be extra challenging if started during the holiday months. I think it would be a wiser choice for our community to consider reopening in the new year in a cautious and thoughtful manner that allows time for all of us to adapt to the changes. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Next speaker is Cynthia Goodman, 8th grade science teacher at TRP. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for keeping us at home and keeping our community safe. While it's certainly a loss to miss out on the in-person time, online classes are going much better than they went in spring. I feel more connected with my students than I thought I would, given that I met over 100 students online. I'm also very impressed with students' work ethic during these challenging times. As a science teacher, I value data. According to California.gov or CA.gov, COVID cases in San Diego County are higher now than they were when we closed in March. Please heed the data and do not open schools until it is safe. I'm sure you know that many places that have reopened schools have had to close due to spiking cases. The science is proven that COVID spreads in enclosed spaces, so that spikes and school closures are not surprising. COVID is most contagious during the first 14 days when many people are asymptomatic. Youth between the ages of 10 and 19 spread the virus faster than adults. As middle school teachers who will bench to over 100 students per week, the risks are too high. We have seen that opening school causes infections and deaths to rise. While there are some promising medical developments in the works, there's still no vaccine and no cure for this virus. We also do not know COVID's long-term effects. We should not return to school just because we want life to go back to normal. Please respect the science and keep our community safe.
This one is from Yan Kiang, a parent. I hope the board will seriously consider leaving school as distance learning and not returning to school until mid or late January. Currently, at least students get almost daily time with their teachers. They will have less time once it goes to hybrid schedule. With hybrid, there's too much health risk for not only students, teachers, and staff, but their families as well. With the flu season coming up, there's just too much risk to open the schools and potentially having to shut down if there are cases. This will be too disruptive to the students and teachers. Teachers need time to plan lessons, and going back and forth will cause more stress on them planning-wise. I asked the district to just hold off on school to resume until next year earliest, and not to keep waiting to see how the stats look. JUHSD has already made the decision early in the school year for school to be fully distance learning until January. JESD should have just planned the same so everyone can plan accordingly and not keep waiting to see what happens. I'm not a fan, I'm not a fan of distance learning since my kids learn better at school where they can focus, but the health and safety of the kids, teachers, staff, our family, and the community is the highest concern right now.
Next speaker is Donald Hong, parent. How are we different than other schools who gambles with staff and students' lives on opening safely that has an outbreak of COVID-19 cases? That's the message. I was like, maybe I can take the next one so you don't have to read that one along. The next speaker is Sophie Sarakis, teacher. Good evening. My name is Sophie Sagarkis, and I'm a second grade teacher at Woodrow Wilson. I'm writing to voice my concern and fear about reopening our schools too quickly. Because of COVID-19 and the flu season soon upon us, please consider a reopening approach that is based on multiple measures and not solely on the county's recommendation. My local school district's board, Fairfield Sisseton Unified, has voted to continue distance learning until 2021. The decision is based on surveys that were sent to parents, guardians, teachers, and students. Please think about sending surveys to our school communities and along with the survey, a clear and detailed hybrid learning schedule. Meeting and checking in with students daily on Zoom has been both valuable and essential on many levels, not just on an academic level. We've worked hard to establish a routine and changing to a hybrid schedule at this time will strongly affect the stability and consistency that we have worked so hard to establish. This is my 28th year at JESD, and due to COVID-19, there have been many new challenges and demands that we have all faced with distance learning. However, I strongly believe that both teachers and students have grown tremendously from this new reality. I commend the board for the caution they have utilized during this difficult time. Thank you for your consideration and all that you do for JESD.
All right.
That's all the comments for this item.
Okay, that's all. All right, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the board or any deliberation?
I do actually.
All right, Mr. Koo.
So Mr. Vidal, I know that in your recommended approach in terms of sort of conditions, but not necessarily a date to sort of reopen, I know that you mentioned that one of the factors was Daly City's new weekly cases were no more than 30, I'm guessing a day, or sorry, 30 cases a week, at least 2 weeks. Do you by chance know what the latest data for Daly City is right now, or how high or how low it might be?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I think 3 weeks ago it was 70 something, mid 70s. 2 weeks ago it was 42. Last week it was 41. So I have not been following that metric on a weekly basis. I've just sort of looked at it every so often. But now the way that it's presented on the county website is just total cases, which you have to write down last week's number and then subtract it from this week's number to get the new cases. So I've been tracking it now every Friday that information comes out, and I'm recording it to be able to extract how many new cases this week.
Okay. And then I know you're saying that you want us to at least hit all of these sort of conditions for at least a 2-week period. And just to clarify, the 2-week period is just saying, as long as the data meets these conditions for 2 weeks, then the board would consider next steps, right? It wouldn't be after 2 weeks, then schools could reopen, just to clarify.
Correct. It wouldn't be like 2 weeks and a day. That's when the school reopens. It means at that point we will submit our plan. We'll start, probably our plans take about 10 to 14 days to be approved. we can start moving in the direction of returning to in-school instruction. At that point, it's not going to happen the next days. We can start making announcements, and as long as the data stays in the similar vein, that's why the 2-week measure is important, because it does account for any possible fluctuations in data that might occur over those 14 to 21 days.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So to piggyback on that question, if, let's say, we made an announcement that we are submitting our plans, to the county, would we wait until 2 weeks after we're approved to actually start moving anyone into a face-to-face scenario?
Not necessarily. When you submit your plan and your application, we have to submit an expected start date. So we say, and usually they do recommend, they are recommending, do at least 14 days from the day you submit to give them enough time to review and ask for feedback. It could be 21 days, it could be 28 days, but at least 14 days. So that's what I would imagine we would do. And like I said, if the board decides to go the route of conditions instead of a date, then we use those conditions to report out on a regular basis to our community to let them know here's where we are as we start to get closer.
Right. So another question that I have is, are we taking into account the flu season and also starting and stopping? So let's say we come up with this date and we end up going to school for 1 week or 2 weeks, and then we have winter break. Are we taking that into account?
Well, it all really depends on when it happens. I know some people say that that's not a good thing, and I can see, and I've heard from speaking to some people, that there are some positives for, doing a 1 to 2 week trial with whatever cohort of students come back, and then taking a break, and then coming back and maybe introducing a new cohort of students at that time. All of our students will not come back at the same time, I can tell you that. It will be a staggered approach, separated by 2 to 3 weeks. And that's part of the conversation we have with our community and our stakeholder groups. Which students come back first? And then which other students do we start to integrate over which periods of time? So sometimes people feel like we're all going to come back. There's going to half the students are going to be there on Mondays, the other half on Tuesday. That's not the case. We're going to start off, it's going to be maybe 25% of the students on campus for a couple of weeks. And then maybe it's going to be 30, 35%. And then gradually we'll get all of the students in the hybrid program back in. And it could be that, we decide that, we're learning so much about this virus. Maybe we learned that middle school students don't spread the virus as much as we previously thought. And so that maybe they can come back earlier. Maybe we learn that they do. Maybe they come back much later. So I think we have to stay flexible and respond to the research as it's learned. There hasn't been much research out on adolescent or juvenile transmission as it was at the beginning of summer. I've had conversations with UCSF researchers, and interesting, it's harder for juveniles to get the virus. They have fewer receptors, but once they get it, they're as effective as an adult would be in transmitting it, but fewer children have it. So I think there was a comment made that says that they're more effective. I don't think I've read that. I'm not going to say it's not true, but I don't think I've read that yet.
All right. And how does the union, the teachers union, and how they negotiate with the district, does that affect the reopening dates at all, and who, how we would phase in the reopening?
So we negotiate working conditions. So indirectly, it might. We don't necessarily negotiate other things. I mean, I think that that's a district prerogative, but we negotiate the working conditions under which we return. So number of hours worked per day, number of days worked, the number of days on campus versus allowed to be off campus, all those things are negotiated.
All right.
Mr. Valenti, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it just in covering the working conditions question.
All right. And my final question is back to this 2-week thing. Well, okay. Have you and the cabinet, have you discussed, the board possibly creating the conditions and a date and not one or the other?
That is a possibility. We can say, here are the conditions we want to see, and we think no sooner than this date.
Okay.
That is well within the board's prerogative, if you would like.
All right.
Or you can say the date alone, as many districts have said. Apparently they have a crystal ball and they can see into the future.
All right. So
or you can say, here are the conditions, regardless of a date.
Right. So I'm definitely interested in hearing what other board members think about this. And so do any other board members have any questions or any deliberation, any comments?
I have some comments. I had and questions. Have we did any surveying of parents and staff with regards to outside of public comment? I mean, we're hearing public comment, but I'm wondering if we've received any feedback or if the district has conducted a survey of what the sentiment or feeling is about what we're discussing tonight, coming back, returning, remaining in distance learning. Has there been any surveying at all during this time?
We haven't done a survey since last May or June on this question. As I mentioned then, and I don't know if it would change much, but it is a very conservative community. People tend to stay toward being safer. Other communities in San Mateo County may not be as conservative or may feel safer to come out and come back to school. Our community does not. And so that's why I'm proposing the more stringent conditions. And I'm not going with, okay, we can apply for a waiver. Let's open up. I heard that would never fly in our community. Okay, let's open up in red tier because the virus spread is substantial. Like, no, that's not gonna work for our community. So I think getting to the lower level of moderate and almost to the minimal, and clumping all of these conditions together, I think we will very likely be in the minimal level of tier opening. When all of these things become true, will likely be our county will be in the minimal level for sure.
So coming back and looking at the timeline that was mentioned, and I'm like President Ali, I was trying to process the 14 days of that whole review process once it's submitted. But then I was just reflecting on the approval of work conditions and what that timeline and how that timeline would impact the application if put forth. And then what also caught my attention is when you said once we submit 2 requests to reopen, even if it isn't all the students or some form of a hybrid model of returning a fraction of the students, that a date would have to be on that application to reopen. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, and that's correct. And that's where I think Mr. Ali's suggestion that perhaps the board wants to consider a no earlier than date in addition to conditions. I mean, I think that makes complete sense.
And so, yeah, thank you. So that gives me clarity. I totally agree with that. I mean, when I factor in the 2 weeks for winter break and then looking at the week of Thanksgiving, that's already 3 weeks. And then you're saying maybe 14 days. It looks like we are already looking at after winter break. I would like to also support what has been stated by President Ali to look at adding a date onto the recommendations to be considered, because again, we all know that at a future meeting, everything we're discussing tonight and or approved tonight could easily change when, you know, infection rates change or just the climate of this pandemic. So that's my recommendation around that. And then one question outside of the plan: how is our district currently impacted with the purchase of PPE? Because I know that Measure K funding was allocated. Was it 75K that came through Measure K to somewhat support the purchase of PPE and or the digital divide, since that isn't something that we've had on our budget in the past?
So PPE, we didn't purchase any of that with Measure K funding. Measure K funding went primarily to reducing the digital divide, to paying down some of the lunch debt for families from last year, supporting our families in crisis and in need. Those are the 3 basic areas that Measure K funding was used, as well as Silicon Valley Community Foundation funds. So PPE, we have substantial funds from state and federal sources that need to be used for preparing to come back to in-person instruction. And so we've utilized those funds to purchase our PPE. The state and the Office of Emergency Management acquired pallets of PPE that they then distributed to counties and public school districts. That's both masks as well as hand sanitizer. So that has made its way through the pipeline and into our warehouse.
Thank you, Superintendent Vidalis. I promise my last question on this. For us in Head Start, we opened up all of our sites in the summer, and we have moved forward with using the social bubble concept of having that work. Unfortunately, we've had to close 6 classrooms, but every other classroom is open. And the reason why I share that, we've been very rigid in our screening process, and we had to create those policies on our own because pre-K looks very different than K to 12. So my question is, if tonight we do decide to approve and move forward and or add on a date, would we then look, if we cross that bridge, would we then, before approving how we reopen, would a committee convene and then present back to the board what that would look like, the plan would look like, or would it just, would we start moving forward with the application to submit a date and the recommendations made? And what would the timeline look like? Sorry, I know I'm kind of just spinning, but what would the timeline look like as far as looking at a plan of what the screening process and reopening process looks like?
Yeah, so that is all, those are all components that are included in this reopening or returning to in-school instruction plan. We would think that a meeting in November or December would be an opportunity for the board to look at that plan, possibly approve it. We do need to first document the conversations that have already been had, the information that's already included in the pandemic recovery framework, and then begin getting feedback and input on those other questions of, you know, how do we cohort students? How do we come back? How do we fold students in over time? So I would probably likely the November meeting would be a meeting where the earliest that we could consider approving this plan. Like I mentioned, when we reopened is independent of our return to instruction plan. The plan should be in place well before we determine when we return.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just had some input to give. I definitely want to let the community know that the comments and emails that have been sent to me specifically have been read, and I want them to know that they did not fall on deaf ears. So most of them did lean toward not reopening this year. And I feel like the district does need to err on the side of caution. And thank you, Superintendent Vidales, for presenting those conditions. But a lot of the schools that reopened in the southern states and the eastern seaboard have had to reclose. And you mentioned New York specifically, who were at a 1.5% infection rate. And Mayor de Blasio just last week said that if they reach 3%, they're going to close the whole school system down. And they've actually had to close several schools down in New York. So
yeah, and so I can comment on that. So yes, New York City did close when certain zip codes reached the 3%. So schools within that zip code closed down, not because there were infections, but because the level of community spread was rising to the level that infection might start to spread.
right, exactly. So I don't know if that 3% is a good rate. And you're right, it was the community, but also rate amongst children populations that went back to school also surged. So I feel like what President Shakil Ali mentioned, a combination of date and conditions, I think the conditions should be even more stricter. And the date is variable. It's not a placid date or static date by any means, but I do personally feel like the conditions should be a little bit more stricter. And if we're the last ones to open, then we're the last ones to open. I understand, especially with our younger set, it's very difficult for them and difficult for our parents to support them. I know a lot of parents that have to take time off of work to, help their kids have a better handle with tech and their classes and staying focused and everything like that. So I'm very mindful of those things. And at the same time, I just would feel awful if, I felt like we were responsible for a surge in infections as well.
I agree. I don't want that feeling at all. I don't even want to think about the feeling.
So, Ms. Manio, did you have a suggestion of a different percentage or I heard you mention the percentage you think is maybe too high, and then the date. Just to get clarification from Mr. Vidales about the date. If we set the date that we put on the application to the County Office of Education is just a, I think you mentioned, you said a no earlier than date, correct? Like whatever date we put.
I think the date would be placed on the application once the conditions were met. So the conditions are met, and then we submit our application for a date. Hopefully it's after the date the board has said we could reopen or we should reopen. Right. And we would look at the calendar and says which date makes sense. You don't want to open the Tuesday after Christmas or winter break because you want at least a week of instruction. Just learning on what's it going to be like to come into school, what's it going to look like. Schools are producing videos and all kinds of things. So you at least want a week of that kind of instruction, perhaps a week and a half or two. So we want some instruction time before coming back.
So we would meet the conditions and then submit the application, and the date at that point would be at least 14 days from that submission date.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that definitely helps me. Mr. Koo, do you have any questions or any deliberation?
Not at this time. I don't know if anybody else has any other comments. I'm just trying to think through some of the alternatives if we're going to sort of like make the rules stricter or try to put a date. I just feel that, like, I mean, personally, I mean, a date I think might be helpful, especially for some parents who like are like, do we need to push it in 2 weeks? Is another 2 weeks here, another 2 weeks there? It's like leads to uncertainty. I think especially as we hit the fall and near the holidays. I don't know if there's anything that we can do to like at least calm some of those concerns about sort of just letting it just get pushed every couple weeks or so. I think that might be more worrying than others. I think that's just my thoughts on if we just sort of let the conditions ride and sort of tell us when or when we should open.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's at least a 4 week at a time. It's not just 2 weeks at a time. It's at least 4 weeks at a time. So we are now in, let's say all the conditions had been met today, October 15th. We would not be returning to in-person instruction, at least the first phase of that, anytime before November 15th. Now, we haven't met any of the conditions that I put forth. Now, we've met some of them, but not all of the conditions that I put forth. And I sincerely believe, Ms. Manio, that when all of the conditions are met, those positivity rates will be very low. Just even now, we're at 2.4% in San Mateo County, 1% in San Francisco County, but the health equity metric is not at 3%. So, and the health equity metric runs approximately in the counties that I've looked at twice as much as the county average. So we can say that when the health equity metric is reached, that the countywide average is going to be like 1.5%, certainly less than 2%. You know, that will be true. And we do have a couple of census tracts in Daly City that are included in that, but very few. They're mostly in the South Bay and some on the coast side.
All right, yeah, so it sounds like to me the consensus is that we all want a no earlier than date along with the conditions. The only thing that was still out there to me was, Ms. Manio, if there was another, percentage that you had in mind, or just, did you want to say anything else about that? You're feeling that it's not strict enough? But actually, we just heard from Mr. Vidal some more numbers, but I want you to have your full, I mean, this is important. It's about safety, like we all said. So I definitely want to hear from you again about that part.
I like 1.5%.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, I mean, even though I've shared that I've had to stand with my agency that I work with during the day, who decided to open classrooms. As a parent, I'm with Ms. Manio. I also want to hop onto what Trustee Koo has said, and two-part. I'm actually even looking at minimal. I appreciate all the work and the research that you've done, Superintendent Vidalis, but I would love to look at minimal. I mean, like it was said, if we are the last one to open, then we are, but I actually think that it's great that we're the last one, because it also shows that a lot of thought and care has gone into when we reopen and why we will reopen when we reopen. So I look at the chart that's presented from the county and the color guideline that we're following. I would say, honestly, from how I feel, me individually, I'd like to look at minimal. And the reason why I support what Trustee Koo is sharing with the date, the anxiety level of families of trying to plan, it's not even just planning, it's just it just gives them a sense of more concrete planning when they see a date. It just seems more definitive. That's just my perspective. Because we say 2 weeks, 4 weeks, the anxiety level and the feedback that we've been hearing from people and shared conversations, they're like, it's 2 weeks, let's go back and watch the meeting. Oh, it's 4 weeks. I just think that we should put a date on it. And that's my feeling. I'd like to put a date, and I'd like to look at minimal. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah, and I do agree that minimal is a good level to aspire to. We will. You may want to revisit that at our meeting in January, depending on where we are. I do think that minimal means that the health equity metric is also reached at that level. So if they're at 2% or lower, it is possible. But San Mateo County really has to do a lot more testing in many of our communities in order to reach that level. Because the more you test, initially you might see an increase of positivity, but then the more you test, you start to capture some of these asymptomatic folks who are isolated, and then spread it, and then it drops. So I agree. Minimal sounds like we could just say minimal. I mean, that encompasses a lot of different metrics, and I think we'd get there.
All right. Well, it sounds like once again, we've said so many times that we tend to be the trendsetters and we're the first. But in this case, it sounds like we're happy with being the last.
Yeah,
And,
I do not want to pave the road to reopening for sure.
right.
That's not a leadership role that I want to take.
So I'm glad it seems like we're all on the same page. So if anyone would like to craft that into a motion, but just to recap, it sounds like we're looking for a minimal status with a date that's a no earlier than date to restart, which still gives us a lot of latitude to push the date, further out in the future based on science and approval from the county.
I have a question actually, before we do one. I know, Ms. Monia, you said you wanted a positivity rate of under 1.5%. I know for minimal right now, the metric is under 2%. Would that be okay with you? Or do you want it to be more stringent than the 2% in the minimal section?
So I think when in the minimal, you need a health equity metric of like 2.2%, which means that the average is going to be below 1.5% if everything moves in the same direction as it has so far in all the other counties. So I think we will definitely hit the 1.5%. And I think what we're saying is, do you want just San Mateo County to be minimal, or San Mateo and San Francisco counties?
Right. That's kind of a question that I had was, well, actually I was operating off that we're using both counties. So hopefully all the other board members were operating off of that as well. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to include a San Francisco County metric. Just like I mentioned, we are so intertwined with San Francisco County. I was speaking to a city official a couple of weeks ago, and they said Daly City's daytime population is really low. Everybody leaves for work, and many of them travel north into San Francisco. Some travel south, of course, but and some travel east, but a large chunk travel north. And so our parent community spends a lot of time in San Francisco during the day.
Yes.
You need to take that into account as well.
All right. Well, it sounds like we've come to a consensus. Is anyone ready to make a motion?
Or you can try out a motion and see if it sounds right, and then see if somebody might want to add change it a bit.
That's true.
And as far as a date would go, I think we would hit minimal if everything went really smoothly. Let's just say it does. Like every week, boom, 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 we're hitting all these metrics. We haven't even met the metrics for Orange yet, but let's say that the first time we do would be Tuesday, and that would be October 20th, right? Yeah, it would be October 20th. We'd have to meet those metrics for 2 weeks. So that brings us to like November 3rd. And then we'd have to stay in Orange for 3 weeks. So that's the 10th, the 17th, the 24th. And then we'd have to meet the metrics for minimal for 2 weeks. That brings us into beginning of December. And of course, you don't want to do anything in December because we're out of school December 18th. So that would bring us to January 5th at the earliest. And again, that's not a good time to return to school and to begin kids. You want to have at least a week or two of instruction to get them ready for coming back to school, at least the group that's coming back. So you're looking at, yeah, the week of like anytime after January 15th, probably.
And then Martin Luther King Jr. Day is Monday, the 18th.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be like, this is, if everything went the right way, starting today. January 15th is the earliest that you could say. So, I mean, you could say after January 15th. It doesn't mean that it's going to be January 15th. It's just after that date when it makes sense.
All right.
And
So,
I would guess, you know, just among us and anyone else who's listening, that's likely a February date because things don't go well. I don't know if there will be, I can't read the future. I don't know if there'll be any surges over the holidays. I certainly would hope not, but there's always that possibility.
well, based on all the input we got from the community and from the teachers before, you know, before we made the decision to go into hybrid and distant virtual learning, based on the fact that we had the at least 6 weeks stipulation, I think we would be safe to, if someone wants to make a motion dealing with starting after the 15th of January and with, you know, with the conditions.
I'll take a stab at the motion. I'll make a motion that the board adopts a target health condition guideline that sets forth that the district should at least meet a minimal tier standard for San Francisco and Cynthia County across all metrics, and will start no sooner than the day after Martin Luther King Day, which is January 19th, which I think gives us at least enough time to plan for stuff before the holidays, and it gives us at least 2 weeks. Or actually, Mr. Dallas, do we start on the 4th or do we start on the 11th?
I believe we start on the 4th.
Okay, yeah, so then 2 weeks of teaching and learning before we at least transition to anything remotely related to in person in some ways.
Okay, can you say that again in just one sentence so that I can get it?
Sure. I'll try again. I'll make a motion that we adopt a target health condition plan that strives to reach a minimal tier for reopening across metrics in San Francisco and San Diego County, and sets that we do not reopen our schools no earlier than January 19th. Is that short enough?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second.
Can I clarify the motion? So it's dated no sooner than January 19th, but we're including the conditions of the minimums being met, correct? Okay, thank you.
That's my motion, yeah.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second.
And so the second, was it seconded by who again? Was that laying on? Okay.
Yes. And let's see. So Mr. Vidales, you're clear on what the motion is?
Yeah, let me read it out to make sure everyone hears this. Okay. Motion to adopt a target health condition for San Francisco and San Mateo County to meet the minimal tier standard across all the metrics. And in the reopening matrix. And not reopen school or not return to in-person instruction. Can I change it to that? Not return to in-person instruction earlier than January 19th.
And just to clarify, just include that note about the Daly City weekly cases, I believe.
Okay, so fewer than 30?
Yes. On top of the minimal tiers.
Okay. All right.
All board members clear on the motion? All right, so if you are in favor, say aye. Aye. And it is a unanimous decision. This is a part of our, responsibility that is not glamorous. And, people are counting on us. That's why our title is called trustee. They've placed their trust and their faith in us. So hopefully, we'll have a good outcome with this. And I definitely feel good. I can sleep good tonight knowing that we did our due diligence. And like Mr. Vidal has mentioned, we're not relying on a crystal ball or, hopeful thinking. We're also balancing it with science. And so I just want to commend us all for this process that we just undertook.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I appreciate the conversation and the exchange of ideas. I appreciate that the board takes its role for setting policy and direction seriously. And this is something that squarely falls into that circle. And we'll come back to you with a plan for returning to in-person instruction based on this direction, and for you to approve that when it's ready.
All right, thank you. So item number 15 is persons wishing to address the board on unagendized or closed session items. This portion of the agenda is available for individuals to comment on or address the board on any issue that is under the board's jurisdiction and not on the agenda, or an item that is addressed in the closed session. So, the public was given a chance to submit speaker cards virtually. The maximum time allowed for any speaker is usually 2 minutes. And I don't think we've been timing any of the
I'll be working as timekeeper tonight. That's my job du jour.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's exceeded it either, so.
No, we've all talked on
Yeah, Mr. Valenti has been taking the time. No one's exceeded.
All right, that's good that we still have that in place. So do we have any cards?
Yeah, we have a couple of speaker cards. Ms. Mani or Mr. Koo, would you like to alternate again? Okay.
Sure, I can do the first one first. The first speaker is Crystal Cox Cooper, resident. I would like to understand the plan for paving the athletic field at Westlake Elementary School. Who approved the project? What is the scope and timing of the project, and how is the project being funded? What steps have been taken to inform the public taxpayer residents in the area of the proposed approved plans? Please provide in general more transparency on the matter. Thank you.
I have a comment from a citizen homeowner voter, John Cooper. I would like to know the plan details for building a parking lot in the upper field adjacent to Westlake Elementary. I would also like to know if the impact to the neighborhood, environment, and wildlife has been studied.
Next speaker is Misha Rodriguez, parent. What is going on with virtual school? There's always been changes taking place in virtual school, and those changes have always been the same for my 8-year-old and 11-year-old. Last week, I was told to pick up materials for my 8-year-old and nothing for my 11-year-old. When I asked why, I was told that the language arts portion of the program was not good for my 8-year-old. I'm worried because my 11-year-old is still using the language arts portion. Why is my 11-year-old still using a part of the program that I was told was not good?
I have one from Jody Kwok, parent. Hi, I was told that we stopped using a portion of Edgenuity in virtual school on July 22, 2020. Edgenuity was approved as a $350,000 plus expense using CARES funds. Will JESD receive a refund for that amount? If so, will this money be used to fund other programs or safety measures? If not, should myself and other families be concerned? Why did the district not get a refund? And who is being held accountable for these funds?
Next speaker is Ala Goodman, Daly City resident. Westlake Elementary has a plan to pave over the field to build a parking lot. Our concern, this is the only large green open space in our neighborhood. This field is used for soccer, baseball, football, kite flying. This is a concern for the community. Many members of the community have historically used the school playgrounds for recreational use at weekends and on the holidays. There's not enough recreational space for families in this area. Parking lot would be a waste and create many safety concerns. At night, who will police the lot? It can become a place to gather, drink, and have drugs. It would create an unsafe environment on the streets. For consideration, schools should focus on building a healthy kids program. The field can be a terrific multi-use for sports activities, a baseball field, and a soccer field, etc. The school and its students would likely benefit from fixing up the school inside and out than from paving over the only green space.
I have another one, last one from Alana Wong, parent. I am very concerned with the black metal fences going up around all of our schools, restricting public access to the fields, blacktops, and playgrounds. It is my understanding that our community was designed to make use of the large schoolyards to make up for our lack of parks and outdoor space. We have used the schoolyards for decades on the weekends and after school hours. To suddenly remove that access without adding any parks is a huge detriment to our community. Where will the kids go learn to ride a bike or play basketball with a neighbor? Please consider giving community access to the spaces when not being used by the school. Just to clarify, I'm not asking for access during COVID. And that was it.
All right, is that all the comments? Excuse me. All right, at this time, we have governance team member comments, reports, and board meeting reflection. And we'll start with Superintendent Vidales.
Again, you know, I focus on all of them, appreciate the board taking them all seriously. And specifically, I talk too much. So I need to speak less, but I felt like today was an important item to share my learnings for the board to consider in making a decision. So I'll work on that one.
All right, Mr. Koo.
Similarly, I think we all abided to all the guidelines. I think especially in terms of sort of listening actively and communicating openly in regards to sort of finding out best to reopen their schools. I think making sure we kind of consider everybody's perspective and sort of what they've heard from just board members as well as the community to make sort of the most informed decision. So.
Thank you. Ms. Manio.
Also reflecting on all of the guidelines, definitely appreciate the collectivity of this board and how we come together to make big decisions that gravely affect our community. We are beholden to those that elected us, and I know that this board definitely respects our roles and positions, so thank you.
And Ms. Liana Anoa'i.
Yeah, I too agree. I think we embraced all of our meeting guidelines, and more specifically, the first one where we're keeping our focus on our students, and our students are our families. And I appreciate that we can celebrate that we approved our workforce housing design. You know, that's another one that we can celebrate. That's a project that we're trying to move forward. And during these challenging times, we're able to say it's moving, there's progress being made. And I was glad to hear Mr. Heath saying that the timeline that they're looking at can still be met virtually. So that's exciting for us. It's something that we wanted to do and that we're seeing happen. What I love tonight too is that hearing us all take a step back. It seemed like we were moving to approve something, and then I appreciate you, Ms. Magno, for reopening the conversation to have us really dive deep, you know, and really dissect the details, you know, and that's important because that is what we are tasked to do, is to look at the details, take the time and fine tune and tweak whatever needs to be done to ensure that there's a level of accountability and transparency. And we did that tonight. And I want to thank you, Superintendent Vidalis and our administrators, because you know, you put in a lot of work in researching and giving us information that allows us to make well-informed decisions. You know, because of what you shared with us, it helped us to balance what we needed to. So I know that I appreciate that. So please keep talking and sharing because we need to hear from you. But again, I take great pride in being a part of this team. You know, we gel, we think together, we respect each other and our diverse experience that we bring to the table. And what I love the most is that we've seen the display of entities and government relationships that don't work. You know, we've seen that on full display in the media, but we should take great pride tonight that that's not what happens here. And I take great pride in seeing how we work together and how we're able to set policies and create the direction to make sure that we're serving our communities effectively and wholeheartedly and with compassion. So I know that I too can sleep better tonight. I join you on, I feel much better in the decisions we made tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And my comments tonight are not in response to the comment cards that came in, but you know, there were sentiments that were expressed to me that I was going to bring up tonight and just ask that we put green space as a future agenda topic so that we can clarify what exactly is happening, not just in our district, but talk about Daly City-wide, because Daly City is comprised of 3 different school districts, which are not under the city's jurisdiction. We all have our own jurisdiction. And I have seen comments on public platforms where fake news is put out there, or you know, questions are asked by the public, but it's based on misinformation. So I think it's worth it to have a discussion about green space in general and not just about a specific school. But within that conversation, we definitely need to clear up any misstatements that have been made. And I just want to reiterate what I said earlier about us working together to make these difficult decisions. I actually won't be on the board in January. So I really am looking to my colleagues right now to, you know, hold us all accountable. And I'm looking forward to helping as much as I can until my tenure is up on the board. And I did focus, as usual, on all of the guidelines, but most especially what's in the best interest of the students. So at this time, we will be closing this part of our meeting to get ready for closed session. And Mr. Vidalis, there was an announcement of closing in honor of. I actually don't have it.
Yes. So tonight, we'd like to ask the board to adjourn in memory of Joe Yusuf Zarur, husband of Rima Zarur, our senior department account assistant in the business services department at the district office. So Joe Yusuf Zarur.
All right, thanks. And we will now take a 5-minute break, and then we'll convene closed session.